Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to take your sources, unpack them, and give you those key insights, really a shortcut to being truly well-informed. Today, we are diving deep, really deep, into a book that gives just a penetrating look at one of the world's most complex nations, a country whose story, well, it's as intricate as it is vital.
That's right. We're exploring Hassan Abbas's Pakistan's Drift Into Extremism, Allah, the Army, and America's War on Terror. It came out in 2015, and, it got some powerful endorsements. Stephen Philip Cohen, for example, he called Abbas a brilliant geopolitical psychoanalyst, quite the phrase, putting schizophrenic Pakistan on his couch.
Wow.
And Arnaud de Borchgrave highlighted Abbas's warnings, warnings of a frightening future, but also, importantly, he saw hope in Abbas's analysis, too.
And it feels like it promises to untangle quite a few mysteries for us, right? Like, why does Pakistan seem to constantly lurch between democracy and, well, military dictatorships? And what's the deal with its relationship with the U.S.? It's so often complicated, sometimes feels contradictory. So our mission today is to unpack these big questions for you. We're drawing on Abbas's really unique perspective here. I mean, a former senior police officer served under both Benazir Bhutto and Pervez Musharraf. Plus, he studied Islamic law at Harvard.
Yeah, that background is just so crucial because what Abbas does so well is connect the dots. Across centuries, across global events, he doesn't just, lay out a narrative. He gives you a framework, a way to understand Pakistan's internal struggles, its external entanglements. And critically, he even suggests a way out of what he terms a frightening morass.
Okay, let's start right at the beginning then, taking the really long view. Abbas takes us way back, 8712. Muhammad bin Qasim, an Arab general whose conquest in Sindh, that was Islam's first major touch on the Indian subcontinent.
Exactly. And he explains how this deeply layered Hindu caste system encountered a sternly monotheistic Islam. And Abbas notes at that very early stage, Islam hadn't yet been, as he puts it, subverted by its own brand of Brahmanism. Its own clerical power structure hadn't fully solidified. So while those first encounters weren't necessarily catastrophic, Abbas shows how the underlying differences, the potential for future clashes, it was all set right there.
Right. So fast forward centuries, and then the British arrive.
Yeah.
And they're pursuing that classic, divide and defeat.
Yeah.
Strategy. They often found allies in the Hindu population, partly because of the sort of budding Hindu patriotism that saw Muslim rulers as, usurpers. But here's something Abbas points out that's really striking.
Yeah.
The mullahs back then actively discouraged Muslims from getting a modern education. They even threatened things like annulling marriage vows if people learned English or went to British schools.
It's incredible, isn't it? And it's such a crucial point because it left Muslims lagging behind educationally. Abbas argues this had really profound long-term effects. It meant Muslims disproportionately ended up enlisting in the army during the world wars. It was just, one of the few paths for advancement if you were semi-educated or uneducated.
Okay.
So Pakistan, at its birth, inherited this situation. A strong, well-trained army, but generally quite lightweight political leadership. And alongside that, a mix of religious parties that were actually comparatively well organized. You see the imbalance right away.
Yeah, you really do. So with that internal imbalance already there, what did this mean for Pakistan's actual creation? Jinnah, he knew Muslims were in a weaker position, but he initially hoped for a united India, right, with strong security guarantees for Muslims.
He did. But Abbas shows how the Congress Party, particularly Gandhi's role in essentially torpedoing the cabinet mission plan in 1946. Well, that left Jinnah feeling he had no real choice. He had to push for what he himself called a moth-eaten Pakistan in 1947. And this forced him, basically, to seek support from religious parties he hadn't really relied on before, empowering them right at the start.
So Pakistan is born into this imbalance, and then boom, almost immediately the Cold War kicks off. How did that global rivalry shape things, especially the military's power?
Oh, hugely. That's a critical connection Abbas makes. Pakistan, strongly anti-communist, needing security against India, it naturally aligned with the U.S. And America focused intensely on anti-communism, often, let's say, overlooked military coups, corruption among its allies.
The enemy of my enemy.
Precisely. And this inadvertently strengthened military dictatorships. It weakened these fragile democratic processes in places like Pakistan. A really dangerous precedent was set early on.
It really sounds like the military's influence got a massive boost from external factors almost from day one. Abbas points to the Kashmir crisis, for example, saying it directly amplified the Army's demands for funding. They became a major recipient of U.S. aid. just like that.
Exactly. And what's really striking, Abbas argues, is that while the army grew stronger and stronger, it simultaneously weakened other national institutions and even diluted its own sort of professional core over time. Meanwhile, the religious parties, even though they often did poorly in elections, they gained influence because the politicians kept failing.
A vacuum.
Yeah. Poverty, insecurity, people turned to religion, which boosted the mullah's influence. And this created that political vacuum the army was just, well, very eager to fill. Imposing martial law at the slightest opportunity, it becomes this cycle.
And you see early signs of this pattern back in the 50s. The army gets called in to deal with language riots in East Pakistan. Abbas says this gave them an exaggerated opinion of itself and a really disparaging opinion of the politician. Then you have the 1953 Punjab disturbances, which Abbas says were engineered by mullahs like Maulana Maududi, who'd actually opposed Pakistan's creation initially, but now wanted power within it.
Yes, that was such a critical moment. It really exposed these deep internal fault lines. There was an inquiry commission led by Justice Munir and Justice Kayani, and they famously concluded that, quote, no two learned divines are agreed on how to even define a Muslim.
Wow.
It just highlights the struggle for interpretation, the identity crisis the new nation was facing. And as the army's role is growing, this key figure emerges. General Ayub Khan. He becomes commander-in-chief in 51 after the previous frontrunner, Major General Iftikhar Khan, dies in a mysterious plane crash.
Yeah.
Abbas notes there are conspiracy theories around that.
Ayub's position gets even stronger after an abortive coup attempt in 52 by Major General Akbar Khan related to the Kashmir War. That conveniently removed several other senior officers who might have challenged Ayub later.
Ayub's rise, his consolidation of power, it really reflects this broader trend of the military just asserting its independence. Abbas gives this example. Ayub telling Brigadier Jilani, Pakistan's first military attaché in Washington, to just bypass the ambassador, bypass the foreign office when dealing with military procurement.
Directly to the source.
Straight to the source. It shows the army acting like its own state within a state. And crucially, Abbas notes, it was the American connection that cemented the army as the most important institutional vehicle for U.S. political influence. That really locked in its power.
So Ayub Khan finally takes full power in 1958. And his takeover, maybe surprisingly, was initially met with some public relief. People were tired of the political chaos. He even introduced some reforms like the Family Law Ordinance in 1961, aimed at, emancipating women. But this is where the religious forces really dig in their heels, isn't it?
Absolutely. The mullahs fiercely resisted these changes. Ayub cracked down initially, but then, crucially, he backed down. Abbas marks this as a huge victory for the religious forces over the state. But it wasn't just about that specific law. It was the moment, Abbas argues, that the term secular started being deliberately twisted, equated with anti-religion, anti-Allah.
Lipinizing the word itself.
Exactly, and you see how powerful that semantic shift can be. It shapes the whole national conversation, solidifies the mullah's narrative, and makes any future attempt at secular governance incredibly difficult.
That shift had huge political consequences. Pakistan's foreign policy also shifted under Ayub. Remember the U-2 spy plane incident in 1960? After that, Pakistan tried to lessen its dependence on the U.S. a bit, signed deals with the USSR, supported China.
Right.
This created a real divergence. For Pakistan, the mortal enemy was India. But for the U.S., especially then, India was increasingly seen as a potential counterweight to China, a fundamental strategic mismatch.
And that mismatch becomes painfully clear in the 1965 war with India. Operation Gibraltar, this covert plan by General Akhtar Malik to destabilize Indian Kashmir. But Abbas details this fateful change of command right in the middle of the operation. General Musa removes Malik, replaces him with Yahya Khan. The key objective, capturing Akbar, fails.
And there's proof of a cover-up.
Well, Abbas cites General Malik's secret letter, which he got from Malik's family. It apparently confirms Ayub Khan knew about the plan, was directly involved, and that there was a subsequent cover-up to protect reputations after it failed.
So the war ends badly. Disillusionment spreads, especially in East Pakistan. They felt completely exposed, undefended. Ayub's image is shattered. This leads straight to his downfall, and Yahya Khan takes over as commander-in-chief. Those seeds of internal conflict, they were now getting seriously watered.
And tragically, they bore fruit in 1971. The dismemberment of Pakistan. Mujibur Rahman's 6 points demanding autonomy, the legal framework order, Mujib's own private intentions, perhaps leaning towards secession. It all culminated in the Pakistani army launching Operation Searchlight, a brutal crackdown, a reign of horror in East Pakistan under Lieutenant General Tika Khan. Abbas puts it starkly. The unified state was always a contradiction in terms. West Pakistani chauvinism, Mujib's ambitions, the army's brutality. It all came together in that tragedy.
So after that disaster, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto takes power. He's the first civilian chief martial law administrator, interestingly. But his time is also full of conflict. Abbas talks about Bhutto clashing with General Gul Hassan, who didn't like Bhutto trying to, quote, denigrate the army or meddle in its affairs. And we also learned about this 1973 ul-Haq conspiracy, a coup plot by junior officers. And guess who presided over their trial?
Let me guess. Zia.
Zia ul-Haq. Bhutto wanted death sentences, but the court pushed back, kind of foreshadowing the power struggles to come.
Definitely. And that raises that deeper question again. How much did Bhutto's own political calculations drive his religious policies? To boost his Islamic credentials, Abbas argues, he declared Islam the state religion. And then, crucially, in 1974, under pressure from religious parties, he amended the constitution to declare the Ahmadis non-Muslims.
A huge step.
A massive step. And Abbas's conclusion is chilling. The mullahs had tasted blood and would be back for more. It really marked a turning point in the religious drift of the nation.
So Bhutto's move, maybe meant to shore him up politically, actually just emboldened the religious hardliners.
That's exactly Abbas's argument. It opened the door wider. And they did come back for more, with General Zia ul-Haq's coup in 1977. Abbas paints Zia as quite cunning. Initially gave Bhutto false assurances about elections, but then moved quickly to Islamize Pakistan. He cleverly exploited the Islamic passion that had fueled the anti-Bhutto movement to legitimize his own military rule.
And the book details the ruthlessness involved.
Oh, absolutely. It's stark. Abbas reveals Bhutto's death sentence was deeply controversial. A former Chief Justice later disclosed that higher courts faced direct threats if they didn't rule in line with the martial law regime.
Wow. So the judiciary was basically subjugated.
Completely. It shows the lengths the military went to consolidate power, eliminate rivals, just power unchecked.
So Zia takes power. He's initially kind of an international outcast. But then, December 1979, the Soviets invade Afghanistan. And suddenly everything changes for him.
Overnight, he becomes, as Abbas puts it, the most allied ally of America. Pakistan becomes the conduit for massive CIA and Saudi funding, pouring into madrasas, these religious schools, and Zia organizes the Mujahideen using these powerful slogans, Islam in danger, holy war.
Yeah.
It becomes this rallying cry.
And this Islamization project under Zia, it had a specific character.
Very much so. It was heavily based on the puritanical Deobandi school, a conservative revivalist movement. And Abbas argues it actively promoted bigotry, intolerance. This laid the groundwork for the violent sectarianism that exploded later, especially between Shia and Sunni communities. He gives this tragic example. Dr. Abdus Salam, Pakistan's only Nobel laureate, an Ahmadi, ignored by state media. A talk he was supposed to give at a university had to be canceled because of threats from the Jamaat-e-Islami's student wing, a clear sign of the intolerance taking root.
And during Zia's era, these madrasas just mushroomed, didn't they? Abbas says they bred uncompromising cynicism, transforming into nurseries for the Afghan jihad. You end up with this army of holy warriors, and then when the Soviets leave Afghanistan, what happens? They become unemployed mujahideen. You can't just flip a switch and turn them off.
Exactly, and the consequences were severe, long-lasting. It led directly to the formation of numerous jihadi groups, Harkat ul-Ansar, Hizbul Mujahideen, many with strong links, Abbas says, to Pakistan's intelligence agency, the ISI.
And they needed a new cause.
They found one in Kashmir. It became a profitable venture, politically and maybe financially too. Then came even more radical groups, like Lashkar-e-Taiba, LT. Its leader, Hafiz Saeed Abbas, notes he was deeply affected by his family's losses back in the 1947 partition riots, believed, quote, "Jihad will continue until Islam becomes the dominant religion." You see that cycle of violence, the long shadow of history.
Which brings us to another huge mystery. General Zia's plane crash, August 1988. Kills him, the U.S. ambassador, top generals. Sabotage was widely suspected. Abbas digs into the official inquiry, the Justice Shafiqur Rahman Commission. What did it find?
Well, its findings were explosive, though perhaps suppressed. Abbas highlights that the commission accused the Pakistan army itself of basically obstructing the investigation, even pointed fingers at elements within the army. They noted things like witnesses having military minders with them, crucial evidence just disappearing.
So who might have done it? What are the theories Abbas presents?
There are several. Soviet involvement, maybe India, or perhaps more disturbingly, internal army factions who wanted Zia gone. possibly even with some level of U.S. knowledge, though Abbas notes the official U.S. policy, Executive Order 119005 since 76, banned assassinating foreign leaders.
Right.
So it remains this huge unresolved question mark. Who really benefited? Why was the investigation shut down? It still hangs over Pakistan's politics.
So Zia's gone. We see this brief return to democracy with Benazir Bhutto, but according to Abbas, the ISI, the intelligence agency, actively worked against her from the start.
Yeah.
He mentions Operation Midnight Jackals, a specific covert op designed to bribe legislators, undermine her government,
Yeah.
and her dismissal in 1990, which had the Army Chief General Beg's full backing. Abbas reveals a contributing factor was Dr. A.Q. Khan, the nuclear scientist, asking Beg to remove her because Khan felt she was hindering the nuclear program.
It just underscores that relentless theme, doesn't it? The Army, the ISI, playing this oversized, often destructive role in politics. Abbas even shares how one ISI chief, Lieutenant General Yavid Nasir, back in '91, expanded ISI operations to support Muslim causes globally, allegedly even using drug trade money to finance some of it,
Wow.
which led to Pakistan being put on a U.S. terror watch list. They only narrowly avoided full designation, apparently, because Israel intervened on their behalf. Just shows you the complex, often contradictory web of relationships.
Okay, then we have Nawaz Sharif's periods as prime minister. After India tests nuclear weapons in '98, President Clinton personally calls Nawaz, urges restraint. But Nawaz, according to Abbas, believed becoming a nuclear power would attract more funding from Muslim countries. So he goes ahead, detonates 5 devices, changes the whole game.
And Abbas connects that directly to the Kargil War the next year, 1999. He reveals it was planned in absolute secrecy by Lieutenant General Muhammad Aziz Khan, Major General Javed Hassan. Musharraf was its strongest advocate. But crucially, other service chiefs weren't fully briefed. Nawaz Sharif, the prime minister, wasn't fully in the loop initially.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Abbas calls it the Kargil syndrome, this complete lack of foresight, internal coordination. It ended up being a military and diplomatic disaster for Pakistan, cost many lives.
Which leads us right into General Pervez Musharraf's coup in 1999. He comes in, initially popular, promising accountability with this National Accountability Bureau, NAB.
Right, the anti-corruption drive.
But Abbas points out, while NAB went after many politicians and bureaucrats, quote, all the big names among the retired generals were beyond the province of the NAB.
Convenient.
Very. And then his most respected general, Ghulam Ahmed, seen as a check on Musharraf's inner circle, dies under suspicious circumstances. Abbas sees this as a turning point where Musharraf started to, quote, increasingly lose touch with reality.
Then comes 9/11, the ultimate test for Musharraf. U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Richard Armitage delivers that famous ultimatum to the ISI chief Mahmoud Ahmed. You are either 100% with us or 100% against us. Stark choice.
So Musharraf condemns the attacks, bans jihadi groups, aligns Pakistan with the U.S. war on terror.
Yes, but crucially, Abbas emphasizes he refused to hand over to India the leaders of these groups. Why? Because given the Army's long involvement with these groups in Kashmir, doing so would have been, quote, a suicidal step for Musharraf and the Army.
That internal contradiction again, playing both sides almost.
Exactly. It meant that even with official bans, the extremist infrastructure persisted. You even see it in the 2002 elections.
Yeah.
Religious parties, the MMA alliance, win an unprecedented number of seats. They form provincial governments and openly advocate for Taliban-style policies.
So the drift continues, even under a U.S. ally supposedly fighting terror.
Precisely. And finally, Abbas covers the A.Q. Khan nuclear proliferation scandal in 2003. Khan takes the fall, presented as a rogue element. But Abbas notes, many Pakistanis just don't buy that he acted alone. It raises huge questions about the role of military intelligence, maybe even army chiefs. Abbas critiques Musharraf for poor judgment of men, for his intolerance of dissent. He argues this really limited Musharraf's ability to genuinely reconstruct Pakistan to tackle these deep-rooted problems.
What a journey. Through Pakistan's incredibly complex history, so deeply intertwined, as the book title says, a law of the army in America. We've seen how religious figures, military ambitions, global policies, they've all shaped the country's path, often trapping it in this cycle of coups, conflict, and rising extremism.
It's a powerful reminder, isn't it, of how profoundly foreign policy choices can impact a nation's internal stability. Abbas closes his book with this really critical question, flipping the script on how the U.S. is perceived. Americans often ask, why do they hate us? Essay. But Abbas points out, many in Muslim countries have been asking for decades, what compels America to be so unjust? He traces this feeling back to years of U.S. support for repressive regimes, policies seen as tilted towards Israel.
It's a sobering point and highlights how these historical grievances, real or perceived, can just fuel this spiral of hate, making it hard, as Abbas says, for the illiterate Muslim fanatic to even distinguish between U.S. government policies and the American people themselves, creates this chasm.
So what's the takeaway for you, the listener, trying to make sense of all this? Abbas suggests that for Pakistan to break free, to reach its potential, it needs, and this is his phrase, a generation of leaders unencumbered by blind doctrines. Leaders who can see beyond these damaging cycles.
Which leaves us with, I think, a really provocative final thought. If Pakistan's drift into extremism stems from these deeply embedded historical patterns, tangled up with global power plays and outside influences, what concrete steps could a leader truly committed to change actually take? Not just in Pakistan, but maybe in any nation caught in a similar web. And perhaps just as importantly, how can the international community, maybe the U.S. specifically, better understand its own role in shaping these outcomes? How do we move beyond simplistic narratives to address those underlying historical issues and help foster more stable futures? Something to think about.